What's going on, guys? It's Brandon and Gavin back today with episode 25 of the Grain of Salt podcast. Today, we're going to be going deep into some controversial discussions. We're going to be talking about everything to do with biblical and political principles. We have an amazing guest, Gabby Schultz, today
I'm Vice President of Turning Point USA.
here at FAU campus. And yeah, if you guys have any questions about if I'm a Christian, what should I be supporting? Should I believe in abortion? Should I believe in transgender rights? Should I believe in all this blah, 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 blah. If you are interested, we have the answers for you straight from the Bible, not from our opinion, but from the Word of God.
So yeah, stay tuned.
Peace, guys.
Look, I'm ballin', I feel like Durant. Look, idols are shaking my hand. Look, the way that I move, got a man. Look, cause I did what you said that I can. Look, you should've bought a Mercedes.
What's up? What's up, guys? This is the
evening.
first time I feel like we've had a live audience
I
in
have
the
a question
background.
for the audience. Is it evening? Is evening nighttime? Yes. Right?
Good evening, Governor.
So when I say good evening, that's right.
I don't know. I would cap evening at like 7 o'clock. After that, I would say night.
But I'm not gonna be like good
Oh,
night, Gabby.
no, you're
You
right.
know what I mean?
No, I feel like that's what
Okay.
Good night.
No.
What's up, guys? I'm Gavin.
I'm Brandon.
We have a very special guest on today. Could everyone please give me a warm welcome for Gabby Schultz?
Wait, what? How do you say your last name?
Schultz?
You said it correctly.
Oh, really?
How do you say
My
your
whole
last
life I've called you Zolk.
Yeah, I know.
That's fine.
I don't really care.
Wait, how do you say that?
Schultz.
Schultz.
Yeah.
How do you spell that?
SZULC.
Oh, see, I don't have an S in front of your name. I always just did ZULC.
Really? I mean, I like
Silly me.
sometimes just to make life easier, I'll just be like, yeah, it's Zolk with a silent S.
Zolk.
If I don't feel like having the
They're both
conversation.
pretty cool,
It's
honestly.
like onomatopoeia, like Zolk. I feel
Yeah.
like I just picture walking in mulch like Zolk.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Gabby, what are we
Guys.
talking about today?
I was about to
We're
say.
going to be talking about religion and politics.
Guys, before we start, I want to preface that this is not a podcast about us telling you what is the correct biblical viewpoint of politics. It is just a chance to learn a perspective of somebody that we believe has biblical values in their approach to politics. So take it with a grain of salt, of course.
Do your own research.
Do your own research.
But
and,
also, we're going to be dating our research from the Bible. So,
I feel like it's
we're gonna
also
try to be doing that.
I feel like it's also important to preface also with like the reason that they chose me as like well versed in the subject is because I'm vice president of a political club. So
could you tell me a
Please
little
shout us
bit
out.
more
Yeah,
about
tell us
the
about your
club? Yeah.
experience with
yeah, so I'm vice president of Turning Point USA. We are a bipartisan political organization. So bipartisan means we don't affiliate with either political party. What?
Sorry.
You're
good.
Yeah, so bipartisan means we don't affiliate with either political party, but we're pro-America, pro-Constitution, and conservative.
So, you just kind of have more of like an open-minded view, you would say? Or like,
I'd say our club focuses mainly on educating.
okay.
So we come from a bipartisan point of view so that we can allow members of all political parties to be able to join our club and feel welcomed in it and be able to learn. But our club itself takes a conservative standpoint. So we push conservative, pro-constitutional values like freedom of rights, stuff like that.
Yeah, like, do you know Charlie Kirk?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, he's the guy. He started Turning Point USA.
Yeah.
Nice.
He's our founder.
So, I guess I just want to start jumping into this. How did you like find yourself involved in this club and like pushing super like heavily for these conservative ideals?
Yeah, I mean, I've been conservative for a while, and I've always had very strong opinions. I love to debate. I love to argue. I love to, protect my opinions and educate people. And I was one day just walking on the breezeway at our campus, and I saw Turning Point. I didn't know what it was at the time. I'd seen Charlie Kirk before, but I didn't know that they were affiliated at this time. And I just agreed with whatever they had on the sign that day. And then I got to talking with the president, and he was like, hey, you should join our club. And then I started off as treasurer and then worked my way up to VP.
Nice, good for you.
Cool. I wanted to ask you, as some people might know, Gabby has like an online presence of some sort. I wanted to ask you, just like tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me how you got into it and how it's affected your life, how it maybe affected your idea of politics and your viewpoint on certain things.
Yeah, so I do social media. I have 2.4 million followers on TikTok. I had 10,000 on YouTube at a time, and I have around 40,000 on Instagram. And I started off social media at a young age. I started doing social media when I was probably like 11 years old. And I would just post silly videos on YouTube that only my grandpa and my mom would watch. But I absolutely loved it. And I did Musical.ly, if anyone remembers Musical.ly before TikTok.
Oh, I
I
remember
did
Musical.ly.
Musical.ly like crazy. And I loved watching influencers. I loved getting involved in influencers' lives. And so I would really just pray every single night. I prayed. And I was like, please, God, please make me Musical.ly famous. Make me blow up on Musical.ly. Make me social media famous. Like, do all of this. Like, just, I love that whole realm. I went to meet and greets. I was just obsessed with influencers, and I wanted to be one so badly. Did not happen when I was 11 years old. Over time, once I got, so I kind of distanced it for a little while. I stopped, but then once I got in high school, I posted a video with my friend that I thought was a good idea. It was an acting skit, and that blew up. And then after that, I started doing more videos of the sorts, and those kept on blowing up after that. And so it's really part of my testimony where I realized that God gives you things when you're ready for them, not when you desire them. And
so good.
that he waited to give me what I'd been praying for so long. I prayed every single night to be social media famous from like the ages of like 10 to like 13, like every single night. And he did deliver on them, but he just waited until I was at an age where I could mentally handle it.
So did you blow up on YouTube or Musical.ly like first? Or
I blew up on
TikTok?
TikTok first.
TikTok. Was there already TikTok at that point?
It was TikTok at that point, yeah.
So like what year would that have been? Like
2020.
Oh, like COVID?
Yeah.
I actually do have a question.
Yeah.
Because kind of similar to you. Same thing with me, because I never blew up. I kind of
Okay.
was just like always wanted that.
Yeah.
And I feel like God never gave that to me because I had like a selfish intent behind it. Like I wanted to be famous because I wanted to just be liked and validated by people. And like now, even like with the podcast, like I could care less if this ever does numbers. I just care more so about like God's will for me, and I feel purposeful and fulfilling when I'm doing this to like spread his word. Did you feel like your heart was in that kind of place when he gifted it to you? Or do you feel like when you still received that, you were still like a little bit like, I just want the fame? Like what was that like for you?
I feel like for me, it was never from a religious aspect of it at all. I would never really call myself a practicing Christian until I'd say my senior year of high school when I started getting into it. At that point, it was really just like I wanted an audience, not necessarily the fame, but I wanted people. I wanted an audience. I wanted people to reach, to communicate with. I just loved the idea of being an influencer and getting to influence people listening to me. Like my favorite thing ever was because my audience at this time was primarily female, ages 9 through 12. So I loved when like a little girl would DM me and be like, oh, like you're my role model. Oh, I did a school project on you. This, that, all it happened. Yeah.
So
and then
cool.
stuff
Yeah.
like that. Like that's what I loved is I just loved getting to touch like people's hearts the same way that I was so touched and I loved like the influencers when I was that age.
No.
Cool. I'm just like thinking a lot of crazy things happen when you have fame or like
Yeah.
give me like one crazy story that's happened to you because of your
Ooh,
like in your whole career of social media.
putting me on the spot. Wait. I don't know. I don't think anything like too crazy
Nothing.
has really happened to me. I mean, like, okay, are you saying crazy like bad or crazy like this was a really cool experience?
Probably, like,
Either
that.
or. Yeah, either or.
I mean, I got to do a meet and greet with like fans and meet like real life fans that had been following me for years.
Well, how many people like came?
It wasn't that many. Like it was probably like 20 people. It was at a conjoined event with a bunch of other influencers.
That's
So cool, though.
crazy.
Yeah.
that's so
Yeah,
crazy.
it was really cool getting to like be that, like have that experience where it's like when I was younger, I would go to meet and greets and I would meet the influencers I liked and I would take a picture of them, post on Instagram, and then having people do that same thing to me and like tag it with me where it's like, I met Gabby Schultz and I'm like, what? Like
Aw.
you met me? Like, yeah.
You're probably like what, 17 doing that? 18?
Yeah, no, it's like 16.
16. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
That's so cool. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
All right.
Wait,
Oh,
Oh.
I actually
I want a
have
crazy story. Speaking of crazy stories, take it away, Gavin.
So, I kind of had a question to actually lead into it.
Oh,
If- if you're cool with that.
Yeah, ask my question.
Yeah, and then after she answers the question, I would love for you to expound upon the situation. So I just want to jump straight into the questions.
Yeah.
So, all right, here goes nothing. So Romans 13:1 advises us that let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. How should we as Christians accept this? Because we met a man today, actually, who a little bit of an interesting belief system. We kind of ended the conversation believing similar things.
Yeah. So let me give like context to the story. So me, Gavin, and one of our other friends, we were going to go see the sunrise and then go to the gym afterwards. And we get there, and I sit down. I probably get there like 20 minutes before Gavin and our friend, and I'm just reading my Bible, and then this Hispanic lady comes up to me and says, like, she's like trying to talk to me or whatever, and she like recognizes me. I don't recognize her, and she's like, "You came to Kingdom Hall." And if anybody knows what it is, that's like what Jehovah's Witnesses call their church. Because a couple of weeks ago, I went to I'm pretty sure I brought this up on the podcast, but I went to the Kingdom Hall, and I met a bunch of people, talked to a bunch of people, and they recognized me, and they were doing like street evangelism, like they were just like, they had like a standout for Jehovah's Witnesses. So we were talking to them for probably like 5 minutes. At this point, Gavin shows up, and this man was walking by and says, "Yeshua never claimed that we had to go to church." And I'm just like confused by that statement. Like, what does that even mean? So before he walks away, I call out to him like, "Sir, like, what do you mean by that?" And then that led to this conversation that probably lasted like closer to 2 hours, I'd say, an hour and a half. And he believes like that we don't have to go to a physical church, and that like tithing is like not supposed to be done to like a pastor or whatever. He believes that the name, he believes, so one of the first things he said to me when we were talking was like, obviously in the beginning of a conversation with somebody who seems like a knowledgeable or like strong about their opinions about the Bible, you kind of want to understand what their denomination or viewpoints are.
Yeah.
So I kind of asked him like his denomination or and some of his beliefs, and I said like the Trinity, and he's like, Jesus is not God. So immediately I'm like, okay, like, did you like even read the Bible? I was like,
So you're not a Christian.
so yeah, I was just confused, right? But he said Yeshua tells us not. So I was confused because I'm like, okay, well, if Yeshua is guiding your life, and I'm like confused because that's Jesus. So we kept talking, and he thinks that it's rude to call Jesus anything other than Yeshua. And like for the longest time, he was referring to Yeshua as like a different being than Jesus. And I was like, okay, we were like so confused at this point, and we're asking questions. And
Yeah.
one of the
Can
questions.
I interject?
Yeah.
I would even challenge that and say not Yeshua, but I would say that it would be offensive to call Jesus anything but Yahweh, because Yahweh was the holiest name for God during this time, that they didn't even speak it. The Jewish people during this time wouldn't even say the name Yahweh, whereas when Jesus said it for the first time and said, "Before Abraham was I am," everybody gasped, because it was like, you did not say that name at that time.
No, that he was claiming like us nowadays, like by me saying Jesus, he thinks that's like incorrect in some way, like which obviously it's not, because it's literally just Yeshua translated from Hebrew to English is Jesus. That's like the translation.
It's so odd, because like by the end, I just was like, okay, so how do you think we obtain salvation? It's like, we believe that Yeshua died for our sins and have faith in him, and then he kept saying Yeshua, Son of God. So I was like, okay, so you just called Jesus Yeshua. He's like, he shakes his head.
He kept saying Christ Yeshua. I'm like,
yeah, well,
he was like Christ Yeshua. It says in the Bible that Christ Yeshua is going to die for our sins and be reborn again or resurrected, and he died for our sins. And I'm like, okay, and I'm so confused. I'm like, okay, well, did Jesus Christ not already do that? And then the way he would never be like, yeah, we're talking about the same person but different name. He would never admit that. He would just like, it was so odd. But
what about just like language translations? Like, you have to translate names.
That's why we were confused, because I was like
none of the biblical
God's
names
not
are what they are in English. Abraham is not
Yeah,
Hebrew.
I couldn't
like
tell you.
none of
Right,
these
keep
names.
going. You were talking about our beliefs.
Yeah, so basically, he also just kept repeating the same idea that Trump is still president. And I have my own personal beliefs about the election of 2020, but I, more than anything, respect the authority that God has placed on our current president. Do I have to necessarily agree with him? I don't, but I need to respect that God has placed him there. If God really wanted Trump to be president, whether the election was rigged or not, he would be president.
Amen.
And so back to the question, Romans 13:1 advises us that let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. How should this impact us as Christians' views of who is our ruler and who is going to be our ruler, regardless of the outcome.
Yeah, so I think that we also need to look at Titus, where it talks about that we need to take into consideration that whoever is in office is placed there by the Lord, and that the Lord picks all governing figures, and that we still need to obey them.
Yes.
So that goes to a certain extent where, yes, we need to hold God's law above government law. So if something is directly, in disagreement to the Bible, so say something like abortion, yes, we as Christians need to advocate for that. We can protest against that peacefully. We have to advocate for God's law, but that doesn't mean defying the government. Whatever rules and laws that the government has in place, we can't defy those.
Let's jump straight to abortion. You just bring it up right away. What do you think is our responsibility? Actually, before we even get to the idea of what we're voting for, how important is it for Christians in general to vote?
It's so important, so crucial. 54% of Christians are not voting in this election, and that is actually
What?
super sad.
54%?
Yeah.
Do you know why that is?
I think it's because they're so torn in the agenda, where it's, okay, am I voting for a bad person or somebody with objecting to Christianity political views, and they don't want to do either. But to a certain extent, you need to be able to have a certain level of humility and a certain level of forgiveness and grace for somebody's past and stuff that they've said, and look at the leadership and look at who is better advocating for the political views of the Bible, who has the closest alignments with the Bible, and we have to vote for them. We have moral obligations as Christians.
I have so many questions just came into my brain. But the first one I thought of was I went to a Trump rally. It was a Turning Point USA event over the summer with a couple of my friends, and it was called the Believer Summit. And one of the stats that Trump brought up is that the 50% number is the registered amount of Christian voters. But then he also brought up that only half of those voters actually vote. So it's like, if you look into a room of 4 Christians, it's like, statistically, only 1 in 4 of those people are voting.
That's crazy.
So, I mean, I think that shows something, because, think about it. If we all want our values to be input, and then we times 4 the amount of people that we have, our polling power, it's like, that's super impactful. Yeah. And his whole saying was too big to rig. As long as if we can I
don't know about that. I mean, we've seen in this past week crazy stuff about people, buses dropping full ballot boxes, and someone turned it into a police station, an unopened ballot box. This was on CNN today, and people burning ballot boxes, all sorts of things.
Yeah, no, there's a verse in Jeremiah. I actually don't have it right here, but there's a verse that it speaks about how, because some Christians are like, oh, I just don't want to vote because I don't like either candidate. I just don't like any of their policies, because you're like, we have to vote with who has the better policies or whatever. But some people are like, well, I severely disagree with both sides. Yeah. And I think this candidate would be better or whatever, who's not Trump or Kamala, which obviously I think is a little illogical. You kind of want to vote for somebody who has a chance to win. Yeah. It doesn't really make sense to vote for somebody that's going to lose. No, I agree too. And I
have this advice for anybody who's struggling in that same point. Charlie Kirk said it the best. A vote is not a Valentine. You're not expressing your love for the candidate. You're not saying, oh, I love this person so much, they're my favorite, whatever, ever. You're not saying that. A vote isn't a Valentine. It's a chess move. It's a small move in a bigger game.
I love that.
Yeah. But I was going to bring up, there's a verse in Jeremiah that talks about how God had exiled these people into different nations, and a lot of them, they were believers that were in nations that were not, they didn't have, how some nations had the presence of the Lord and were led by the Lord? Some of these believers were in countries that were not governed by Lord-fearing men. And it says that you should care for the prosperity and the welfare of whatever country that you're a part of. Whatever nation you're a part of, care for the welfare of that country. So by saying oh, I hate the governors or the presidents, it's like you're not caring for the welfare of your country by not voting.
No, I agree.
So I think that we're called to vote.
I think so too. I think as Christians, again, we have a moral
Obligation.
Obligation.
Yeah.
I don't know why that just slipped my brain. We have a moral obligation to vote 100% because, you know, we as Christians, we are God's stewards here on the earth. We are here to, you know, live as disciples of Jesus, live as Jesus, so therefore advocate for the things that he's not here in person to advocate and to preach for. We are here to stand up for those things.
I forget where we were, but you brought up how it shouldn't be the person. It should be less character and more policy based when it comes to
Yes.
selecting a leader.
100%.
My question was, how does Trump having 34 felony charges against him, how does that affect your viewpoint of him as a leader?
Yeah, so are you guys familiar with lawfare?
And not
What
sure.
is lawfare?
Maybe if you
So
explain it.
lawfare is the idea of a current government teaming up against anybody opposing them for prosecution. So an example that would be Putin in Russia. Anybody who tries to run against him for president, he finds indictments on and arrests them. And that's right now an issue that we're facing in our current government of Trump now currently repeatedly being targeted for various things that they could try to prosecute him on. And somebody who was actually on this case of the 34 felonies, Steve Crowder, I think his name is, he was actually... Steve Crowder.
He
was
the one
caught,
with the wife and stuff?
He was caught on camera saying that it was lawfare 100%. 100% that it was lawfare and that it was a targeted attack on Donald Trump because of the political election. So those, I don't even count those because it's completely rigged. It's completely set up to be manufactured against him to coerce the public eye into seeing him as a bad person, the same as Putin does.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely can agree with that to an extent. Because obviously, if you're the most famous, he's probably is the most famous person on the planet.
Besides Jesus.
Besides Jesus. I mean, like, on the planet, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But, like, if every move, and plus being a leader, it's like everything you do, it's like all of his actions matter, like, thoroughly. It's not just like he's Taylor Swift, where, like, if you, like, say a racial slur or something, like, the Taylor Swift's gonna, like, be canceled or whatever. But, like, if Donald Trump does something anti-Semitic, like, it's a lot worse, basically. I just think if everybody's life was monitored that closely, that a lot of us would probably have
100%.
a lot of bad looks from people. You know what I mean?
100%, yeah.
Here's a good question. Do you have anything to add on to that? I have a question. Should a Christian vote for Kamala Harris?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Really abruptly, I don't think so. I don't think that you can call yourself a Christian and vote for Kamala Harris for various reasons. I think that she has no regard for human life as a whole. I'm not just talking about abortion. I'm talking about solely every instance of life when it comes to, you know, death penalty, euthanasia, when it comes to 300,000 children who are gone missing, and that spike of 64% since Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have took office. The first day of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden administration, they removed a policy set in place already on the border that had been in place for the entirety of the Trump administration and had been in place for many years before. They eliminated that policy the day that they took office, and that policy was DNA testing at the border. And what that does for us is so that now a grown Mexican man and a little Mexican girl can cross the border together, and there's no 40-second DNA test. He says, that's my daughter. She can't speak for herself. Child sold into sex slavery.
Yeah.
And it's as easy as that.
Border is like a huge thing I wanted to bring up because you talked about how there was a, what did you call it? Like agreement basically put in place with the Mexican borders and whatever. There was an agreement with the Mexican border and with China. This is just me talking from what Trump said, so obviously I don't have this is just what he said on a podcast. He said he had a agreement set up with Mexico and China, and basically it was like, if any fentanyl comes through, like, we're gonna like put all these tariffs on you and ruin your economy.
Yeah.
And it was like the amount of illegals coming at the time were at an all-time low for the past like 50 years or whatever. And then also now we can see like Venezuela, like the whole thing from Venezuela. Venezuela was like the most gang-ridden, like crime-filled place in like the world. And basically what they did was they just started emptying their their prisons and just sending their worst criminals into the U.S. borders. And it's just like, if we're allowing that to happen, like if you look at their crime rates now,
It's no regard
after
for
Joe
human
Biden
life.
became in office, it's down by like 70% or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
And the whole fentanyl outbreak, Trump said, this is what he said. He said that he predicted the fentanyl outbreak because he knew that that's what China was doing. They were saying, if you bring fentanyl into my kids' lives, I'm going to hit you with these tariffs.
Yeah.
And then he told Joe Biden about this, and he claims that Joe Biden, well, obviously we know he got rid of that agreement. Now, we don't know, obviously, what would have happened if he had left it, but it's safe to say that it probably wouldn't have been as bad as it is now.
Yeah. And it just shows that there's absolutely no regard for human life. And that's not just talking about human life in America, whether legal or not legal, but it also talks about the other countries that America is in cahoots with, where it comes to the 5 wars that the Biden-Kamala Harris administration has allowed to take place and start. During the administration, Trump was one of the first presidents ever that no new wars happened while he was in office.
Why do you think that is? Because Trump always claims, like, if I was in office, this war would be ended. It
And
wouldn't
Putin
have
said
started.
that too.
Why do you believe the other wars besides just the Russian war?
Yeah, and I think that it solely comes down to a leader that people fear. You need a certain amount of fear in any leader. We have the fear of God in us, and we respect God. You need a certain level of fear in any leader. And Donald Trump was so strong. He was such a well put together businessman, such a strong leader with a force. He was not afraid of anybody. He countless times throughout the media, throughout different meetings with different politicians, with different world leaders, he asserted his dominance in so many ways present. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris just do not have that level of fear, that level of dominance of capital. They don't have that. Nobody is afraid of Kamala Harris. Nobody's afraid of Joe Biden. There's no competence for them to be afraid of.
So, kind of to piggyback off of that, I like how you said fear of God. I think that we look at some of the most fierce and strong leaders in the Bible. An example is David. He led with such power and sovereignty because he was anointed by God, because he had the heart of God, because he loved and trusted God.
Yeah.
What do you have to say to some Christians who may look at Donald Trump and say that they can get behind maybe some of his policies, but they can't respect him as a person because they don't really see him representing Christ well?
Yeah, well, I can say that Donald Trump was one of the most respected presidents in United States history, whether we want to respect him or not.
You're talking, wait, clarify, because he was disrespected a lot more. You mean like
He was respected amongst all leaders of the world.
World leaders, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe not a lot of media-based Americans, but from other world leaders, he was one of the most respected. And when you can see other people respecting somebody, you have to set aside your humility. You have to set aside your pride for a minute, and you have to look at, why do so many people respect this person? What does he say? What does he do? How does he carry himself? What about this person is making people instantly yield to him and not want to mess with him?
So are you comparing like the reverence that we are supposed to have for the Lord? Like there's a psalm, it's like Psalm 26. I could be incorrect, but it's around there. It says that David says that a friendship, I don't know the exact quote. It's like a friendship with the Lord is to fear the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, and then it later goes on to showing like to have reverence just to have fear, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, are you comparing the two as in saying like they fear, quote unquote, fear Trump, therefore it's like they have this reverence for Trump, so they're not going to,
Yeah.
in like a similar aspect?
Exactly. Just in the way where it's like they know, they have respect for him because they fear him. Same as we have respect for our parents because we fear our parents a little bit. We love our parents. We know that they love us. But we have that little bit of fear of punishment, of judgment, of whatever it is. We have that fear of our parents that they instilled with us. And because of that, we respect them and respect what they say. You only respect somebody who proves that they deserve to be respected. And Donald Trump has proven that, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have not.
True. I mean, yeah, I'd say it's a little different between God, obviously, and the president. Because we're supposed to have faith in like that what God has provided for us is enough.
Yeah.
Whereas like the president, we want the president to prove to us why our vote mattered.
Yeah.
It's like if they claim these things and they don't do it, I'm no longer going to have respect for this person.
Yeah, and I think that he absolutely proved himself during his first term.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. And yes.
And I think that we can see also that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have failed. I think that if you have to be in fear to leave your house, if you have to be in fear of your borders, if you have to be in fear of so many things in our government today, if you have to constantly live in fear of your safety in your own country, in your own building, of whatever it is, if you're in constant fear, your leaders have failed and they need to be fired.
So you're kind of, it just made me think about separation of church and state by what you said. And I recently gave a speech in my public speaking class. And, so yeah, guys, whenever I have a speech, I always wear my outfit that I wore. But this Tuesday, we didn't have a podcast, so I didn't get to wear my stuff.
He wasn't dapper.
I wasn't dapper that day. But I wanted to do my speech on why the Bible is reliable. And I didn't even propose to do why you should be a Christian, because they already told me that's not allowed. You can't do that. So I was like, why? I said, why is the Bible reliable? And they basically said, yeah, that's cool. But then a week before, they I literally had it all done basically. I could have given the speech right then. They're just like, nope, can't do that. So then in the very end, I was like, all right, I'm going to talk about why you should believe in, or you should research contrasting theological beliefs. Mm-hmm. So why you should be knowledgeable on Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and other ones. And I just wanted to ask you, do you think that the Bible should be allowed to be spoken of and taught in schools, public schools?
Yes, I think 100%. I think that we see that in, just how the world, when people don't have faith in their lives, 9 times out of 10, they will end up being a worse person than they would be with faith in their life, because we have that moral code book to keep us in standard. Whereas if you don't have the Bible, you don't have that moral code to keep you in check. And we see the faith decline in church and state happened in 1833 is when separation of church and state came into a factor. And when we look at the polls, we see a rapid decrease between 1833 to 1890s of people who identify as Christians rapidly go down. And separation of church and state isn't just schools, but the original foundation of the separation of church and state happened to separate the Catholic Church, the Pope, from being able to govern laws in the United States. That's what that original separation was. The coming into school was part of that, yes, but the main part of that was the government, not schools. People think it's just schools, but it was the government. It was that the Pope can't tell the United States what to do. And I think that there's good things and there's bad things with that, where it's I think that part of a country being free is, yes, we shouldn't be as structured as the Vatican. In a perfect world where everybody's a Christian, that's amazing. But I think part of the appeal of getting people to America is the freedoms, and that we don't have those strict lines. But with that being said, we also are allowed to lead with our religious beliefs. So separation of church and state doesn't mean that a political candidate can't use their religious beliefs and their religious values to be able to advocate for certain things.
I agree. I think that it's so stupid. I think there should be no separation. I think they should be free to interact with each other, basically. Yeah. Because look at the Bible. Jesus didn't believe in separation of church and state whatsoever. Look at every single time Jesus went to somebody, or think about Paul. He was going to the leaders of that town, of that nation, explain to them what they're doing wrong. And at the time, these churches were the ones that were governing this body of people. Yeah. Churches nowadays don't do that. Churches nowadays don't have a say in your taxes, in what cars you're allowed to drive, and how much CO2 you can produce, stuff like that. Yeah. That's not what their job is anymore. Yeah. But back in the day, it was. So when Jesus goes up to the Pharisees and says, these things are wrong, or when Paul goes up to them and is this is sinful, this is sinful, you need to change this to make you prosper more. You need to change this so that your country runs better. It's we don't view Christianity like that near as much. I think most Christians don't anymore. Mm-hmm. It's more it's a personal thing. Faith is a personal thing. Yeah. I think that faith should be a nation thing. It shouldn't 100%. Just be
And that's what our founding fathers intended too. One nation under God. They fully intended for us to lead with the Bible.
Oh my gosh. I could talk about this forever. People tell me all the time, Constitution is not rooted in the Bible or whatever. And while there is some truth to that, if you look at direct quotes from people in the Constitution, it's 65, 75. Correct me. I'm going to search this up in a second. But I'm just going to say 70. It's 70% of all quotes in the Constitution are from the Bible. People might think, there's people like John Locke, people like that, you're going to see in the Constitution. Mm-hmm. That's who people think the whole Bible is quoting. But in reality, it's like Mark, Luke, John. You know what I mean? James. It's just like people don't understand that the Bible had a huge part in the founding fathers' logic when it came to creating these rules that were put in place. And why did they think that the U.S. became so prosperous? Mm-hmm. There was never a country before them that, or in modern times, that, who?
That, what was complete your sentence.
Oh, like that rooted all their rules in the Bible.
The Vatican.
Well, I mean, isn't that like 2 feet wide? Isn't the Vatican like not really a city? Okay, I mean, like, it's not the same type of country as...
Yeah, I mean, Italy and Spain and majority of Europe was rooted on the Bible. So I wouldn't necessarily go as far as to say that, because they were all Catholic countries at this time and they were rooted on the Bible. But I do agree in Western civilization that the pursuit of the Bible in the founding of the country allowed for it to prosper greatly, and that was like deeply important, and that a lot of countries do miss that. Yes.
Kind of to stay on this topic, I read the book of Jeremiah for the first time over the summer, and Jeremiah is in just an agony and lament for the country of, I believe it was Israel, because during this time, everybody is just so lost. They're following their own ways. And they have no fear of God, this country. And this country is it's become evil. And God reveals to Jeremiah that he's going to kind of punish this country for falling away from him. And when I read a lot of the things that it characterizes this country has, I really relate it to a modern day America. I see America as a modern day Israel in the eyes of God. What do you think is destined for America if we don't get our act together, especially in the realm of politics? What happens if we continue to just let these non-biblical principles and people continue to just rule over us and just lead us down just a darker path?
Yeah, I mean, referring back to Titus, like I said before, God does ultimately decide who is in charge. So I think that whatever happens is God's will, God's plan. So I don't think that he would let our country fall into ruins. But with that being said, I do think that our country is leaning into communism with a lot of Kamala Harris's policies, a lot of the things she advocates towards. I think that we're definitely leaning towards communism with her. And that's not to say that we're going to turn into a communist state, but that there's a lot of things that challenge our rights that she promotes and that she advocates for. And I think that that's very dangerous for us having the reputation as one of the freest countries.
What you just brought up, it made me think of how some people accuse Trump's taking democracy out of the nation, and some people say the same thing about Biden, and I can see both sides. But this homeless dude that we were talking to, or we're not sure if he's homeless, but this guy we were talking to this morning, he brought up how was Trump really a president, or was Kamala or Joe Biden really a president if they were doing things that were unconstitutional? And what I'm speaking about was, correct me if I'm wrong, you probably know better than I do, whenever he was trying to give money for college or whatever, and it was found unconstitutional. So basically what he did was he went back and just tried it a different way. He's like, oh, well, here's a loophole, so I'm just going to do this. And then I'm going to see if it's found unconstitutional this way. So it's like he's actively trying to pursue the persuasion of the Constitution and what his powers are. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, that's just scary. Your president shouldn't want to do that. Mm-hmm. And I just, what are your thoughts on,
and going back to...
Do you think that Kamala is going to end up doing what people are saying, she's going to be, power hungry, basically, and want to do everything she wants?
No. So going back to the lawfare, I do think that, again, we see Donald Trump being targeted, but not Joe Biden with stuff that he does. But your question, is Kamala Harris going to become power hungry? I don't think that Kamala Harris... I don't think that she's, for lack of a better word, I'm going to say smart or competent enough to be able to do that. I don't think that she has the ability to be able to become power hungry and to be able to demand all these things, because I don't think that she is the person running for her position. I think that there are many people behind her that are using her as a pawn, as a cover picture. I think that her being a black female, I think that they're using that to get people who are uneducated and who are voting purely off of emotions, not off of facts, who are saying, oh, yes, she's a minority, so I'm going to vote for her, rather than she has good policies and she's smart and she has done things in her career, I'm going to vote for her. And I think because of that, I don't think that she actually knows enough to be able to advocate for her own feelings. I think that she says what people tell her to do, and I think that she has people running her campaign for her and everything that she says for her, and I think that she does what they say, and I don't think that they would let that fall into enough power hungry, because then that could lead them to get caught and put Kamala in situations where she doesn't know how to defend the things that she's fighting for because she doesn't know them well enough.
I wanted to ask you then, if I think that this is a case for honestly both sides, but I would, from my experience, I would say more people who vote liberal, and it's the idea that people vote on emotions or on character and less on policy. Do you think that if Trump was a well-liked person amongst all people, do you think that he would just be like a no-brainer, basically?
100%. I think also I'll put it this way also, okay? Because I think that this has a lot of control over our entire country right now. I think that if you put Kamala Harris, if you put her policies, if you took the way she talked, if you took everything she's ever said and done, all of her achievements, I think if you put Kamala Harris in a straight white man, she would not win. She would not even have a chance. She would have maybe 4% of the overall.
Like, that's a crazy 4%.
That's what I would say. That's what I would project.
Who knows?
I think that's
Who
what
knows?
I
I mean, I don't think that it's like that severe, but I definitely think it plays a part. I wanted to ask you, this is like probably the biggest thing that Christians talk about. What are your thoughts on abortion, just as a whole? Like, go through it.
Yeah. So.
Is it biblical?
No.
She's like, actually, third trimester, totally fine.
So, abortion is the sacrament of the devil.
Oh, Seth Gruber.
What?
Do you know who Seth Gruber is?
No.
Oh, no, I'll have to talk about it in a second. You go.
Yeah, so he speaks very well on abortion, and he quotes a very famous Catholic philosopher, Peter Craver, who has the philosophy that abortion is the sacrament of the devil, and that that Satan wants to kill God, but he can't. So he goes for the babies because he knows that it wounds the heart of the Father, and that it causes chaos on earth. And we see that it being the sacrament of the devil because it uses the same key words that we use during our Holy Communion, the same holy words. This is my body. This is my body are the words that were used during the Holy Communion, said by Jesus. And these are the same words that the abortionist political party uses to protect their rights. It's so sad that they use the word right and they cover up these heinous acts under the words rights and freedoms. It's truly sad that they've brainwashed people so badly to believe that murder can be called a freedom. But they use these words, this is my body, with the opposite blasphemous meaning, where it's mocking. It's mocking communion, and it's using it for the opposite meanings, saying this is my body. And Jesus says, this is my body that's given up for you. But abortion says, this is your body and I'm giving it up for me. Jesus says, I must die so that you can live. But abortion says, no, you must die so that I can live. Abortion is the sole opposite mockery of the holy sacrament of communion, using the same holy words, this is my body, that Jesus said for us.
Wow.
Yeah, I wanted to add. So the Seth Gruber guy, he was at that Turning Point USA event. First time I'd ever heard of this dude. Genuinely, like the way he spoke, I almost was like crying.
Yeah.
He was like, he's so good at speaking.
That was
like,
a great talk. Yeah.
Wow.
He honestly is more. He spoke more of like abortion than he did like religion or anything or politics.
Yeah.
Obviously, he talked about politics, but like he's so good when it talks about coming to abortion. Like he brings up it's the sacrament of the devil, and it's even mentioned in like 1st and 2nd Kings. Like it says all the times that I always bring up on this podcast that I think sexual immorality is the like number one thing that Satan uses on men specifically. because he knows that it's just such a stronghold that he can wrap it around us, and it's so hard for us to let go of that. And you can see this in First and Second Kings, because you look at all these kings, and it'll give a list. It'll be like, these were all the good kings, except like these are all the kings that did things that were right in the sight of the Lord, except they didn't get rid of the high places. And Seth Gruber explains this perfectly well. He says that the high places were places that they would go to sacrifice to Ashtaroth and Baal. And Ashtaroth was the goddess of sex, and Baal was the goddess of sacrificing babies. So it's like they would go up there, have sex praising one god, and then kill that baby, go back later, kill that baby, praising Baal. So it's like, it's genuinely just a sacrament. It's so heinous. And the fact that like,
Wow.
like Satan had the ability to warp the minds of men that feared God, because obviously like you can be sinful and still like repent eventually and go to heaven. But it's like the fact that, I'm trying to think of one, like, I could be incorrect, but I'm pretty sure Solomon, he left the high places up. Solomon, like the wisest man to ever live. Even he fell short of that and all the great things he did. And I mean, it took until like Hezekiah to take these down, which is like forever later. I couldn't even tell you how long, like 500 years probably. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and like it goes deeper than that too, where it's like if Satan can't reach us inside the womb, he'll reach us outside the womb. The same as the same people who advocate for abortion, murdering babies, are the same people who advocate for transgender drugs and mutilating our bodies and going through our minds, convincing us we're not good enough, putting those thoughts of anxiety, of no self-worth, of thinking that something is wrong with us, thinking the way that God designed us perfectly, that something is wrong with us, putting those thoughts into us and making us change ourselves and wound the Father.
I'm curious if you know the exact percentage of instances of abortion that are like rape, because that's such a common argument. It's like, okay, morally aside, what if someone rapes me? And I think there's a whole nother debate, but like, I feel like it's I feel like it's kind of a weak argument to say something like that when I just assume it's so like such a small percentage.
Yeah, percentage of abortion or percentage of pregnancies?
Percentage of abortions that are in instances of rape or incest. I think isn't that the two biggest arguments for abortion?
Do you have?
Well, I would do pregnancies. Let me search up pregnancies real quick.
Yeah, pregnancy is less than 1%. For abortion, it would probably be 2 or 3%.
Okay. So do you think that makes it a weak argument then to say, or that's still kind of higher than I assumed it would be? Or
okay, the national rape-related abortion pregnancy rate was between 5 and 6%. So
yeah,
like that's obviously a lot higher than just pregnancy. I'm pretty sure pregnancy is like closer to like 1%.
yeah,
Because there's a lot more pregnancies than there are abortions. But I mean, 5%. Most people probably would assume that it's higher. The way they talk about it, you'd assume that it's like 57% or like 60%.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, yeah, it's not. And same people would make the argument of like oh, but like saving the mother, like dying during childbirth. That statistic is like 0.00001%. That never happens. We have so much technology, especially too. We have so much technology during these days where it just doesn't happen. It doesn't
like
happen.
C-sections, like
Yeah, there's so much assistive technology, and doctors are so smart, where those things just genuinely just don't happen anymore. There are cases, and I'm not going to deny that, but I think that you hear about that maybe once in a year happening, maybe less.
yeah, I'm not sure, but I'm gonna give some verses as to, or let me just ask you your opinion first. When it comes to abortion,
Yeah.
are there any situations where abortion's okay?
No.
And if not, if you don't have any verses, I have a couple verses here I'd like to share.
No, I think that I might know what you're talking about, but no, I don't think so, because I think that it goes back to, there's many times in the Bible where things are said that don't contradict each other but could be taken in opposing ways if you don't look deeper into it. Like how we were just talking about the Romans verse versus Titus, where Romans says not to, follow any authority besides God, but then Titus tells us respect your political authority because they're put there by God. There's many instances like that in the Bible where you have to look deeper into it. And I think that you need to look very deeply into the core aspects of what abortion is, and that's that God said he knew us before we were in our mother's womb. He knitted us together in our mother's womb, meaning if he knew us, we had a soul. He had a plan mapped out for us and knew us personally before we were even conceived. We have no right to play God and change his plan under any circumstance. We're not God. Just because a serpent told us in Genesis 3, ye shall be like God, does not give us the permission to play God and choose what lives we can end and what lives we cannot. That is not our decision.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to read these verses off, and then I was going to explain, because I've said what you kind of just said to a couple other Christians that I know, and they have reasons to why they think that.
And we do.
And like they're understandable reasons. Like you could see where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And I wanted to bring this up in a second. But Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Isaiah 49 verse 1. Before I was born, the Lord called me from my mother's womb and has spoken my name. Psalms 139 verse 13. For you created me, my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. So basically that shows that biblically life starts at conception.
Before conception.
Or before conception. I mean, yeah. So, but usually the argument is like conception to whatever. So we'll just say that the very beginning is like conception.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, because you can't have an abortion if it's not concepted. But biblically, you should believe that any level of pregnancy, it should not be terminated, because God views that person just as valuable as he views Gavin or Gabby sitting right next to me. It's like Jesus has perfect knowledge and judgment, and he understands that the value of their lives are the exact same as that baby that's in the mother's womb. Even though that most humans, even I probably fall short of this. Like, I probably subconsciously see less value in something that I don't have a relationship with that's inside of a womb. It's hard to see the value that God sees in that thing because you don't see value in it. They're like, well, if my 12-year-old daughter got raped and my life is going to get ruined because she can't support it, I can't support it, it's just going to ruin all of our lives, and that kid's not going to have a very prosperous life. It's just going to be a bad life altogether. And I'd say that what you're saying to me right now is the same thing as saying, if Jesus believes that we're all just as valuable, if I were to say, all right, you have a kid that you don't want, the only way you can get rid of this kid is by killing a random dude. You'd be like, oh no, don't do that. Don't do that. You're putting more value on that random person than you are the person inside the mother's womb. It's the same thing. You're saying that I'm going to end my suffering by ending that baby's life. In God's eyes, that baby's life is just as valuable as your neighbor's wife, as your neighbor's life. So it's like, it's the same as that question, but nobody in their right mind would say, yeah, I'm going to get an abortion and the cost is I'm going to kill a random person. Yeah. Nobody would agree with that. But biblically, it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. That's my opinion, but that's just what I've gotten from reading the Bible.
No, yeah, it's an interesting perspective, and I think it all goes down to exactly what I was saying before: is that we're not God and we can't play God. We have no authority. We have no right to play God. It's not our decision. Anything that God has governed, anything that God has decided, anything that God has predestined, we have no authority to step in and interview and intervene and say, no, God, not your plan, but mine. We are playing God by making those decisions and stepping in and blocking stuff that he has already made plans to prosper. We are telling God, not your plan, but mine, and playing God and making ourselves like God, Genesis 3.
Yeah, it's just like, oh my goodness, so much. We're just going on about this. I'm going to end my suffering by making this person inside this person's stomach, by making them suffer.
Amen.
It's the same thing as saying, I'm going to stop my suffering by causing suffering to someone else.
Yeah, exactly.
Who's alive. It's the same thing.
Exactly like the same as like what I was saying before, where Jesus says, I must die so that you can live. But then in abortion, it says you must die so that I can live, where we're putting more emphasis on ourselves, more care for ourselves than somebody else, which is exactly what Jesus tells us not to do. Jesus tells us to look out for our neighbor before ourselves.
What other policies, besides abortion, because I think abortion is just such a big one, what other policies do you think we as Christians should like really be careful about and like a lot more thoughtful towards?
Yeah, I think that definitely border issues is a big one.
What is your personal viewpoints towards that?
I think that the border should be absolutely locked up. I think it should be secured. I think that Donald Trump said that if he gets elected, that he will do the largest deportation since Obama. Obama did the largest deportation in history. He did the largest one. And I think that that is a great idea because we see every day numerous deaths, numerous rapes, numerous children getting kidnapped, sold into sex slavery, so many things happening that have been peaked, that percentages have gone up tremendous amounts in the past 4 years of this administration that we have. And it has been like no other in American history. And we're the only country that's not doing something about it. All the countries around the world right now are getting fed up with immigration because it's an increasing thing, not just in the United States, but other countries as well. Poland right now, if you cross the border in Poland illegally, they shoot you dead. Right there. We arrest you, we chase you, they shoot you dead because they're not messing around with it anymore. Because it's not something to be messed around with. Because we are countries. I don't think we should shoot people. I don't think we should shoot people, but I'm saying it's not something that needs to be taken as lightly
as it should be here.
Exactly. It needs to be a lot more important. And like it all goes down to why doesn't our current administration think it's important? They don't think it's important because they use it to they use it for their benefit. They use it to swing elections in their favor. They use it to swing policy voting in their favor. They use it to swing, emotions of people who vote with emotions rather than actual formulated political opinions. They use it all fully in their favor. You can vote right now if you're not a U.S. citizen, not legally, but you can. And I'll explain that because you can get a social security card without being a U.S. citizen. You just walk into a social security office, you walk into one, and you say, "Hi, I would like a social security number." They don't ask you for citizenship. They don't ask you for an address, nothing. You don't need one at all. And it's always been like that. That wasn't made by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. My dad came to this country illegally, and he received social security number. Everybody in his family did. You don't need to be a legal citizen to receive a social security number. And with that, so Kamala Harris has come out and said that if somebody who is illegal, meaning their vote does not count, if they vote anyways, and they say that they weren't aware that they couldn't vote, they're not prosecuted for it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're caught.
Giving them a green light and protection.
Exactly. All you have to say, you can with fully acknowledge, no, this is illegal. You can go, you can vote without citizenship, just with the social security number. You can register to vote and vote just with your social security number that you don't need citizenship to get. You can go and vote. And if somebody catches you and says, "Hey, you're not a citizen, you weren't allowed to," "Oh, I didn't know." "Okay, go free."
This is crazy. I didn't know your dad came here illegally.
And that's why they want so many people crossing over here illegally, is because they can use that in their favor 100%.
So this is a good question. So Charlie Kirk, I saw he was on, I forget what campus, but there's this guy talking about deporting people, and he's like my father came in illegally, but I didn't. And basically Charlie Kirk's stance was that your dad would be deported with the new laws because he came in illegally knowing that it was illegal, so he should be left. So and then he also said that you being somebody who didn't have a choice, you're not legal actually because you were born here.
I was born here.
Yeah, so he could give amnesty to those, or give understanding to those who are the children of illegals. But how do you feel that you work for Turning Point USA? How do you feel that if Charlie Kirk was in office and had his way, your dad would be deported?
My dad's legal now.
Yeah, but he said that those who came here illegally, sure they're legal now, but it's they came here legally, so they don't belong here because they came here illegally.
I don't think that he meant for people who are currently legal. I think he meant for people who are still illegal.
Yeah, I could be
children
misquoting, but
citizenship, because a lot of people will do that. They'll get their children citizenship because it's easier for children to get citizenship. They'll do that, but then they'll stay behind the books and they won't get their citizenship because it's more of a factor for them.
I could be wrong, but if you marry somebody it's American, if somebody from Mexico marries you're legal.
Yeah, that's kind of what my parents did.
Oh, really?
It wasn't a really a green card marriage, but my parents dated for years ahead of time while my dad was here on a school visa, and that's how he was in this country legally, was on his school visa. He was in school at New York and University, and my parents broke up, And then they got back together like a week later, I think. And then
True love right there.
Yeah, they got back together like a week or like 3 weeks later. I don't really know. But like when they got back together, like my dad had found out that his citizenship, or that his like current legal working visa, his school visa, was about to expire, and that he was going to be illegal and in fear of getting deported. So then they just got married at like a courthouse 3 months later.
Are they still together?
Yeah, 100%. They loved each other.
okay.
They
That's
dated
cool.
for 3 years
That's
before
really
that.
cool.
You know, like they were 100% going to get married, but they just rushed it up a little bit for that green
just
card.
Brought it a little more, yeah. So, all right, open border is one of the policies that you think we as Christians should care more about. What are some of the other ones? Can you tell me some?
Closed border.
Oh, my bad. That's what I meant to say. I just meant the debate of open.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah. I think definitely that we should, I think definitely that we need to also pay a lot more attention to policies that are held up to our state elections. I think that people don't pay enough attention to those things.
Like the ratification of amendments like 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
There's a lot of amendments right now in all the states that you can vote for on November 5th or before that in early voting. And I think that people need to pay attention to those elections and those policies that are being left up to the states. Right now in Florida, there is a radical leftist abortion ban or pro-abortion bill that is trying to get passed right now that would make it allowed for you to get an abortion in any term, any point in the pregnancy, if it was allowed by any doctor. Any doctor, meaning a psychologist, your therapist, who you tell, oh yeah, I'm sad because I'm going to be having a baby, can now say, okay, you can go get a baby even though you're 9 months along. You can go get it killed.
Interesting.
So, I was listening. I think this is also a Seth Gruber thing. Or it could be a Charlie Kirk thing. But when we think of abortion, wait, you guys in the back. When you think of, there's people behind the camera. When you think of abortion, what do you imagine like forceps? Is that like how you would think of abortion? Like you have like tweezer looking things that squeezes the baby.
Yeah, like you break the baby.
Is that how you like imagine abortion? Okay.
There's a lot of different ways. It depends on how long you want.
So most people, I'd say, think of abortion as like you have the forceps, you go and you grab the baby by its head, you kill it basically. 60% of abortions last year were done from a pill. People don't understand that. So more abortions are done from a pill. So what they do is they'll take a baby that could be, I don't know what the month is, but I know it's like you can see the baby is like big enough to like hold in your hand. Mm-hmm. So that's got to be past like 4 months. You know what I mean? And what they'll do is they'll say, these are, by the way, this is the craziest thing. The people who created the Nazi gas to gas the Jews, that company after World War II obviously went under. And the same exact company came up with a different name and started making these pills for abortion pills.
Dang.
So they originally
I
were
don't know
killing
that.
Nazis, and now they're killing our babies.
What?
And
That's wild. I didn't
so
know
what they
that.
do is all you need is you say, hey, can I get this abortion pill because I have this kid? And they'll be like, sign some papers. You say yes. And then in like a couple days or whatever, you call your doctor as you sit on the toilet, and they're like, basically they're just like, don't look. Just like, you basically just like poop it out or like push it out or whatever.
Yeah.
And
Dang.
they say don't look, just flush. Because when you look around, you literally see a baby floating in your toilet.
Yeah.
It's like, how disgusting is that? And how people, I don't know, it just annoys me.
That's so sad.
No, it's really sad how inhumane it is, and I think that it's so tragic. I think that it's so sad that the media has tried so hard to brainwash and misconstrued what it actually is, and brainwash women so badly to the point using these words, freedom and rights, to brainwash women into thinking that our bodies aren't as powerful as they actually are, that we have the power to create life, and that is a baby, and that is connected to us. After you have a child, whether you abort it, whether you have it, whether you had the baby 30 years ago, no matter what it is, there are cells that remain in your body for the rest of your life from that fetus. And whenever you get sick, those cells immediately are the first ones to go to that part of your body that's in danger, that's sick, whatever it is, and actively fight for your life. So even after you killed that baby is in you for the rest of your life, fighting to save yours. And I think it's so amazing the things that pregnancy does to a woman's body and how much of a beautiful God-given gift it is. And I think it's so sad that we've allowed women to get so brainwashed to the point where we don't understand that anymore, and that people genuinely believe that murder can be a freedom.
Jeez. All right, well, my last question for you. I don't know how many questions do you have?
That was my last question.
My last question for you is, I don't know how long this one might be. But do you think that gay people should be allowed to marry legally?
Yeah, I think that it does not matter because it's not a real marriage. And I'll say that from a Christian's perspective, that marriage is described in the Bible as something that is unified under God. And so marriage by that means would have to be approved by God and, done in a church with God's blessing, done with the presence of God in a state of prayer.
Yeah.
And legal marriages, courthouse marriages, are not that. And those marriages aren't approved by God, so therefore it's not a real marriage, so it's none of our concern.
Yeah, that's like literally, that's my,
I did not know that at all.
Say that, but not many people say that, but that's like exactly what I believe. I think that it's not for me to say like what you can and cannot do. I'm not going to take your free will away from you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then again, it's like the same way that I think that two gay people who are dating, I don't think it's a genuine relationship.
No.
The same way I don't think that marriage is not a genuine marriage.
Yeah.
Because if marriage is between a man and a woman, I have a verse for that too. I don't even know what it is. It just says a man leaves his family and then
Genesis 2:22.
There's like 20 of them.
Yeah.
But I just think that it's not genuine. So I think that if there was a vote, I'm not going to vote for it. I'm not going to be like, yeah, you should legalize gay marriage.
Yeah.
But it's like if there was a vote to like vote against it, it's not for me to say. I'm not supposed to like force them to not do something.
Yeah.
It's like me saying like, are we gonna what's something that's bad? Like, dude, why can't I think? Abortion, right?
Okay.
It's like, if they get an abortion, I think that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, I'm not there. I'm not God. I'm not gonna be like, I'm gonna use my own power to put my will onto your life.
I think that's different.
What do you mean?
I think that you should be advocating against abortion because that's protecting the children of God.
Is that what I said? That's not what
I
I
don't
meant to
think
say.
he's saying.
That's not what I meant to
I don't
say.
think he's saying he's not advocating. I think he's saying, if you get an abortion, there's nothing I can do about it. I can
Okay.
tell you you're wrong, and I can tell you I disagree with that. But at the end of the day, I can't do anything. I'm powerless. Only God can impose judgment or.
Okay, I don't think I said that right. Yeah, you're right.
I just think that wasn't a good example.
that was a bad example. That
Use
sounded wrong.
transgenderism.
Yeah, you could do that. Like I would say.
Can I help you out?
Yeah, just like I
Like
don't
if
know
somebody
words to
is
say.
if somebody is transgender or is identifying as the opposite sex, if a man is cross dressing as a woman,
that's what I'm trying to say.
then they can say that they're a woman, but I don't have to feed into that delusion
right.
Yeah.
and that mental illness, and I don't have to call them a woman because I know that they're not.
Yeah, so they can say they're married. I'm not gonna be like, no, like go.
Yeah.
Don't say you're married. Like I'm not gonna do that.
It's not real.
I'm just
None
gonna
of
be
it's
like,
real.
I don't agree with it. I don't.
It's
think
all
you're
just a
married.
mass delusion that's been formulated by leftist media, and that people who are so emotional and never grown up and have been coddled their whole lives and never told no, that all of them have these ideas that they can be whatever they want, they can do whatever they want, they can say whatever they want, and they can identify however they want, and that they can change things that are unchangeable, and they think they can do these things because they were so emotionally vulnerable and coddled. And I think that as people who weren't coddled like that and who actually have common sense and logic, that we have no means and no need to feed into that delusion and make ourselves mentally ill to feed somebody else's mental illness.
Yeah, when I see all these like interviews and like the question's always like, what is a woman?
Yeah.
So many people hate that question, but I mean, it just exposes illogical thinkers like left and right.
Yeah.
If you can't answer what a woman is,
Like
You
one of
shouldn't
the
be allowed
most
to vote.
simplest questions ever.
You should not be allowed to vote. If you don't know the difference between a man and a woman, if you don't know the difference between XX
Well,
and XY chromosomes, you are not mentally competent to be allowed to vote.
I think it goes deeper than that. I think it's an emotional thing. Like people don't want to. They don't. First of all, the reason they can't answer that is because they don't have a root for anything. It's
Yeah.
like
Delusion.
if there's like somebody who believes in something, but there's no root to why they believe it. They're just like, oh, just because.
Yeah.
It's like saying, oh, well, this is a woman because it's a woman.
Yeah.
Right. That's just like there's no root in the word. It's like that's just a sign of an illogical thinker. But I would say that most people who say like, oh, because it's a woman, they usually have an emotional reason behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not to say like, same with abortions. It's like, if you think killing somebody, innocent kid is wrong, like you shouldn't be able to vote. It's like there's emotions behind it. Like I know people who think that the rape case is okay because of an emotional thing. They're like, I don't want to ruin my life, and that's a hard thing to like, a hurdle to go over. So I mean, I don't think that they all shouldn't be able to vote, but I think that it's just sad that there's people in the world that do vote that are so like
Yeah, you want to hear
blinded
this?
by their emotions.
I think that we should have mental competence tests to be able to be allowed to vote. I fully do. I think that you should have to take a test to prove that you're mental
cool.
competent enough and to prove that you have enough political information and background and prove that you want to vote, a civic literacy test. I think that you should be required to take this to prove that you care enough and that you know enough and that you're going out of your way to educate yourself enough to be able to vote and that your opinions are actually able to be formulated.
Are there any countries
Honestly.
that practice that? Because I know correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that they actually used to make African Americans do that in order to vote back in the day, right?
No clue.
Yeah. They had like
They had to. They were required if they wanted to vote to take a civic literacy.
Oh, no,
test.
that's
Or
true.
same
In
with
America,
women.
yes.
but they
true,
couldn't
yeah.
like read or write, so like
And
they,
same
they
with-
knew they wouldn't be able to vote.
And then
Yeah.
same with women too. So it's like that was practiced back in the day. Are there any countries that practice that today? Do you know of?
Probably.
So okay, that was way different. Like white.
Oh,
people-
and I'm not saying
that was like a
was.
Jim Crow
I'm not
law.
saying that was okay. let that be clear, guys.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, I think it's a very fair point. It's like, if you look at a lot of interviews today, a lot of people are asked, "Why do you support this candidate?" They can't give you an answer.
No.
And
I
like,
think- Yeah, I think that there is a civil literacy test that you have to take in high school. Like you took it, like I took it. It's just so easy. Like they
Yeah.
need to make it harder. Because like, honestly, when I was like 17 and took that test, the fact that I passed it is honestly embarrassing. Like I'm not a stupid high
Yeah.
schooler, but like I didn't know that. I don't know anything about politics when I was 17.
Dude.
I don't really know
Yeah.
that much now.
I'm
So
gonna
it's
be
like-
honest with you. I didn't take that, and I'm still able to vote right now.
It wasn't a requirement to be able to vote. It was a requirement just like in our history classes.
I thought it was a requirement to
Yeah.
graduate. I didn't know that.
Like I had in order to
No.
graduate college, I need it. So that
No, I'll
I
tell
didn't
you
know
this
that. I thought it
though.
was a high school then.
I'll tell you this though. The requirements that need to be made and the test scores on the exam to be able to be a U.S. citizen are a lot harder and a lot stricter than those who are already U.S. citizens to be able to vote, which I think speaks volumes.
That doesn't make any sense.
I think that speaks volumes if an immigrant has to prove themselves to be able to come into this country, and then somebody who was born in this country but knows nothing can just go ahead and vote on their own. I think that it means a lot. I think that people should have to take that exact same test that immigrants have to take to be able to vote. I think that it should be equal.
Okay. Well, that's all the questions I had.
That's all the questions I had. I think I didn't realize you were just so like well versed and just so informed about this. I love the way you
Thanks.
I saw
spoke.
her. I saw her on the breezeway. Who was I with? Was I with you? I don't know who I was
I
with.
don't think.
Yeah, she was tabling for Turning Point USA with what's his name? Trevor, I think.
Nick.
Nick, and he's the president. And yeah, they were pretty smart guys.
Yeah, if you could give like one piece of advice to anyone who's unsure of voting or doesn't really know what they want to vote for and they are a Christian, just a quick summary, like what would you say to them right now?
Yeah, I would say two things. I would say the first thing being the point that I made before is that a vote is not a Valentine. You're not a Valentine. You're not expressing your undying love for a political candidate by voting for them. You are solely making a chess move. And also that instead of getting your information from the media and false sources, that you should go and do your own research. But I know that's hard to do. So what I advise for people to do is go online and take a political standing placement test. You can look them up. It'll ask you a series of questions, and you can answer those questions according to what you believe on the policies, and it will match you with the political party and candidate that your views mostly align with. I would say do that, formulate your own opinions.
That's cool.
That is cool.
Gabby, thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
It's been a blessing to have you and your just biblical and political views that I know I'm not as well versed in by any means, but I'm just glad that we can learn, the viewers can learn, and it just means a lot for you to take your time to be here today.
So what have we learned? We learned if you're Christian, go vote. Don't just sit here and think that praying's enough. You do need to go out and put your vote in.
Vote
it
Trump.
matters. She says to vote for Trump. Go with what the Bible says. Could be Trump. Who knows?
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, what do we learn? Abortion's bad.
Is
It's
it?
a sacrament of the devil.
It is.
It's awful. Do not get abortions.
I wouldn't advise it.
Borders. We gotta close our borders off. We don't want our Venezuelan criminals killing our daughters, being scared to let our kids walk around at night.
And don't just vote in presidential elections, but vote in all policy and political candidate elections,
Primaries.
in your state and in your county, because they go a long way.
At the end of the day, guys, it's important to do your research like online, but find your research in the Bible. What does the Bible say? What is the truth of, what does the word of God say that we should follow? You know, I think all these politicians have really good means of like what they're preaching, like, oh, follow this. But like at the end of the day, what does the Bible say? You know, and that's what we're trying to say here. Like all these policies that we've talked about, I believe there's biblical answer, biblical truth that we've done our best to just talk about today. And so if this changed any of your guys' mind or anything, just know it's the truth that's making you feel convicted about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amen.
But yeah, guys.
This has been wise words from Gavi
Zolk.
Zolch.
Schultz.
Schultz.
You got it right the first time. What happened?
Because you said Zolk.
I just said I say that to people.
Gabby Schultz, everybody.
Gabby
My name
Schultz.
is Gabby Schultz.
But yeah, we'll see you guys next week. I'm Gavin.
I'm Brandon.
I'm Gabby Schultz.
This is a Grain of Salt podcast, the number one podcast that you should take with a grain of salt. We'll see you guys next week.
Peace.
Peace.